For USCFootball.com, I'm Keely Eure here with Shotgun Spratling for its analysis of USC's 64-63 win over UCLA in Pauley Pavilion. Shotgun, it's almost a year to the day where we saw a similar scene. It was in the Galen Center, and it was with Jonah Matthews, but it was a buzzer beater that put UCLA away to end the regular season. What do you take away from today's win?
I mean, the first thing is it was a lot quieter after this win than it was last year. One, because it was in Pauley Pavilion, but also just no fans there, so there's nobody cheering. You could just hear the players, which is interesting. We heard a lot of things during this game because there was nobody in the stands, and it kind of Pauley Pavilion, the way it's shaped, everything kind of reverberates a little bit more than at the Galen Center. So heard a lot of what was going on in the court, and the coaches complaining to the referees and different things. It was interesting to kind of listen a little bit more, even though farther away actually than at the Galen Center. But USC, huge win for them. They fought back in this game. They struggled from the beginning, but they turned things around, chipped away. Just didn't seem like they were going to have enough time to catch up because UCLA did make a lot of shots in this game. They took some, they're not the best analytical shots, as far as they took a lot of mid-range jumpers, and that's something in the game, as far as the NBA, where it's, hey, layups or threes, that's what a lot of teams are going towards, so they're not analytical friendly shots, but they made a lot of tough contested shots in the mid-range, and that was what was carrying them throughout this game. But USC, their defense comes alive at the very end. UCLA finished the game 1 of 6 in the final 5 minutes, and free throw shooting went USC's way, actually, even though they only shot 50% themselves. UCLA misses a couple of big free throws in the final minute, the front end of 1-on-1s, to give USC an extra chance, give them a second extra chance. And USC didn't look like they were going to take advantage of it until a huge shot from Tajidi. Wasn't the primary option on a play. It was kind of a scramble. Ethan Anderson almost fell over the line trying to pass the ball in because he was getting close to a 5-second violation. Gets to Tajidi, coming back towards the left corner. He's fading out of bounds as he puts up a shot. Big high arcer, splashes right through the net. Big win for USC to crush UCLA's soul basically 2 years in a row at the buzzer, because both these shots, they were buzzer-beating threes to win the game, but it wasn't either time. It wasn't that USC was tied, and hey, if you miss the shot, it goes into overtime, and both teams live to fight another 5 minutes. No, UCLA had the lead in both of these games. This game particularly, UCLA had a 13-point lead early, led the entire game, led by 11 at halftime, led by 8 with that 5 minutes to go before the USC kind of shut them down defensively. So just crushing for the Bruins in this one. They lost the same way earlier this week to Oregon, which, turned this game from a battle for the regular season title into a battle for second place and a hope and prayer for tomorrow's game against Oregon State for Oregon. So it was a different matchup, but you see the Bruins have struggled to finish out games, and USC, on the other hand, have done really well this year with closing out games on the defensive end as far as just locking teams down. And then this game was the first time they really had to come back with that lockdown, and they make a big shot at the end. Tajidi wins it for them.
We heard from Andy Enfield after the game. They called it the Hail Trojan. He joked that it didn't go as planned in practice as it did on Saturday. We heard from Taj after the game. What do you have to say about that play?
Yeah, Andy was joking that, this is the play we draw up all the time. We practice it at practice. No, he said, he was saying that, Taj shooting in the corner while he's fading away over 2 defenders is exactly what we want to draw up. That's not the case. Taj clarified a little bit later that USC was trying to run a play because they were down to by 2 points at this point, trying to run a play to tie the game. There was about 3 seconds left on the clock when they were inbounding the ball, and they were trying to throw a quick alley-oop to Evan Mobley or get him the ball down low and let him go to work with a quick move. Instead, UCLA had it defended really well. Tajidi was setting a screen for Evan Mobley. He pops out to the wing. He's not open initially. He kind of goes up towards the top of the key and juts back down towards the corner, catches the pass, and Ethan Anderson, like I said, kind of falling forward with his momentum, passes it to him, and Taj did say that Ethan put it right in the pocket, right where he needed it, so he could get the shot up quickly before the defense could get there. And, it's just a perfect shot from Tajidi. He struggled in this game, but, when you make the big one at the end, no one remembers that you were 1 for 6 from three-point range before that.
As you mentioned, it was a slow start for USC, and you were at Pauley Pavilion. It seems like you noticed a turning point for the Trojans. What did you see?
I think most people in the arena noticed because Chris Kapko, one of USC's assistant coaches, was going off on the team. He was face to face with the players. He was in their face screaming. There was the team came out flat. They didn't have the energy they needed to have on the defensive end. They were just missing a couple shots in the offensive end. I didn't see any issues with some of the shots they were taking. They weren't playing terrible there, but they just weren't fighting through screens. They weren't doing the extra things you need to do in a rivalry game to win, and they fell behind. It was 20-7 at the under 12-minute timeout, so the second media timeout of the game. And he went off on them, and he was yelling, screaming at them. Everyone in the pressure row from across the arena could hear him, going off on them. And he, at one point, he turns and points to the scoreboard for them to look at it and says, we shouldn't be giving up 20 points in 8 minutes, basically. And it worked. It was the tactic. He got in the players' faces, and they turned things around. They came out with more defensive intensity after that, and that was the key for them. Now, it wasn't the complete turning point of the game. They went on a 9-1 run, but UCLA, scored some points at the end of the half. They got a big 3-pointer on the final bucket of the first half to end up sending the game to halftime with an 11-point lead. But it was contagious. It was the defensive energy that they needed, and they carried that throughout the game. And when UCLA finally stopped making a couple tough shots, that's when USC was able to climb back in at the end of the game. Another area or another time in timeouts, he was really tough on Drew Peterson, was getting on him a lot. And Drew Peterson, and hey, this is where you got to know your players. You got to know who can take the tough coaching, who needs to be babied a little bit, needs to be, have their back rubbed. How will the person react to it? Drew Peterson struggled in the first half. He was 1 for 5. I tweeted early in the second half that, I think if USC gets back in this game, it would be Drew Peterson would be the difference maker. And he came alive. He got a third foul, had to go sit almost immediately as I was tweeting that. But then when he checked back in later in the game, he finished with 8 points. He hit 2 big threes for them, and he was a catalyst for them down the stretch. He stepped up. USC ends up with 4 guys in double figures, and that's big. When they have more than just Evan Mobley and a lot of times just Tajidi, then they're a much more dangerous team. They got 4 guys. Chavez Goodwin was terrific off the bench for them. So they got 4 guys stepping up, and that was kind of the difference. It wasn't that Evan Mobley had to make the shot at the end or Tajidi had to make the shot. They had some guys to help them get back in place so those guys can make some big shots as well.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you too, Shaka. I know when we previewed this game, you were concerned about Isaiah White not being able to play. He didn't play in this game. How did USC make up for that?
Yeah, they went with a lineup with Max Agbontpolo in the game to the starting lineup, and the lineup didn't work great. So, they made some adjustments on the fly. Now, Max came back in and played a lot, but one of the things that changed is, USC started with that lineup with Drew Peterson and Agbontpolo on the wings. That's a huge lineup. Tajidi's at 6'2", and then you got 6'8", 6'9", 6'11", and 7 foot with the Mobley brothers inside. But UCLA was a different team with Cody Riley in the game. Now, UCLA was also missing a player, Johnny Juzang, their leading scorer, and the only guy that scored in double figures the first time they played. He was out with an ankle injury, so they were missing someone too, but they were really able to get the ball inside early and get Cody Riley kind of involved, and that kind of changed the dynamic a little bit. Isaiah Mobley didn't play great in this game, so Chavez Goodwin actually came and, played a ton of minutes in the second half, played some crunch time minutes, and he was terrific. He had a couple of big offensive rebounds. He had a couple of putbacks. He finished with 12 points. USC's now 5-0 when he scores in double figures. He played a season-high 25 minutes in this game, which shows you that Andy Enfield and the USC coaching staff is willing to mix and match as needed. If someone's struggling in a game, then you got to be able to find someone on the bench. You can't just rely just on the starters. You got to be able to move pieces around, and I think that's what they did in this game. So I was impressed with the way that they made things work with a different personnel, with Isaiah White not being available, and going against a team that had some different personnel than they faced the first time.
Andy Enfield joked after the game that they're all going to be Oregon State fans. What are you expecting for that matchup, Oregon State, and what would it mean for USC if Oregon State does win?
Yeah, tomorrow on FS1 at 5 p.m., USC fans should be tuning in and should be wearing their black and orange to be rooting on the Beavers there, because if the Beavers can beat Oregon, which they did earlier this season, and they are plenty capable, especially they playing at home. They beat USC at home earlier this season, so they are capable of winning this game. I don't expect it to happen with the way Oregon has played outside of the USC game in the last month or so. But they're capable of beating USC, and it's a rivalry game. Who knows what happens, but it's huge for USC. If they do win that game, USC currently is a half game in front of the Pac-12 standings. But because of the COVID protocols and everything else, Oregon is not going to play as many games as USC. They're going to play 2 fewer games as long as they play tomorrow. And because of their win percentage, they will actually win the Pac-12 if they win tomorrow. Now, USC has more wins. They have the most wins in the Pac-12. They're 15-5, the most wins they've had in conference play since 1992. Now, granted, they're playing 2 more games this season, but it's the only other time they've had 15 wins in conference play. So USC has had a terrific season, but it would mean so much more if you can call yourself Pac-12 regular season title champions. To go through the 20 games, to play all these teams and say we're the best team, that would be huge for USC. So they're going to really be rooting on the Beavers in that one. It would be the first Pac-12 title for USC since 1984-85. It would be the first outright title in 60 years. So, USC's really going to be rooting for the Beavers to win that one, but we'll see how that one kind of plays out. It should be an interesting game too.
I'm sure. Now, as you mentioned, USC has 21 wins on the regular season. I know it's just a couple hours from this game, but what do you take away from this season so far as a whole?
I mean, this is a team that was predicted to finish 6th in the conference. They've, blown past those expectations. Obviously, Evan Mobley is a game changer in the middle of the lineup, on the offensive end, on the defensive end. He had his 9th double-double of the season in this game. He changes things, defensively with what you can do. You can guard anybody. That's a big piece. But they overhauled this entire roster, and those guys that they brought in have been key pieces for them. They went out and searched the grad transfer market, and they found some really unique pieces. Taj Edey has been spectacular for him. This big game winner here, wearing the number 2, the Jonah Matthews number 2 that, he hit the game winner in last year. He's been spectacular for him as that second leading scorer behind Evan Mobley. Drew Peterson, who they didn't know if it was going to be eligible, he's been a unique weapon for them with his size and length and ability to make plays. And then on the other grad transfers, Isaiah White as a starter has brought the energy for him. Chavez Goodwin has been terrific off the bench, bringing energy, bringing leadership. So the pieces they went out and got have been really key for the way this team has come together and been able to do some different things than they were in the past and the way they played defense. So it's been impressive that they were able to put this team together when they only had a couple pieces returning, and you only had really Ethan Anderson and Isaiah Mobley, who had, a game experience for USC, significant game experience. So to bring back a roster that only has 2 guys that really played for you and to turn it into a 21-6 team, I think is really impressive. Now, there's been times where they haven't played great. That Utah game really stands out as they're now watching that game on Sunday, hoping for the best when they could have had, control of their own destiny. But, they're playing terrific. And when they make some shots from the outside, they're a really dangerous team, and they could make a run in the NCAA tournament coming up. We'll see what they do in the Pac-12 tournament next week in Vegas, but then in Indianapolis after that, they've already locked up their spot. They're going to be there as an at-large team if they don't win the Pac-12 tournament, but the Pac-12 tournament could give them an opportunity to improve on their seeding. And that started with today's win, because it's another quad 1 victory going to UCLA and getting that road victory there. So, helping the resume a little bit more. I think the last time I looked, they were 17th in the net rankings. They may bump up a spot or 2 depending on who else was playing, the outcomes of some other games. So we'll see where they're at. If they can get up in the top 15 in the net rankings, they've got a great opportunity to potentially be a top 3 to 4 seed, and they can only improve themselves if they can win some games in the Pac-12 tournament. So a good opportunity there. They want to win that tournament title. That's something they really, is really a emphasis for them. They want the title, especially if they can't get the one tomorrow, if Oregon wins. Yeah. So they want to be able to call themselves Pac-12 champions in some form, but it will also help them going forward in the NCAA tournament because they will improve their seed.
Well, you previewed the Pac-12 tournament already a little bit, Shotgun. So I'm just going to ask you, do you think it's realistic that USC could go to Las Vegas and win the tournament?
Definitely. I mean, they've shown that they can beat anyone in this conference besides Colorado. Now, they've got to get over the hump of Colorado, but will they face Colorado? That'll be the question. You never know with the tournament setting, how it's going to play out. If they are the number 1 seed, if Oregon does lose tomorrow, they will avoid Colorado's going to be the number 3 seed. They were locked into that coming in. They had the tiebreaker over USC and UCLA, I believe it was. So UCLA slides to number 4 now. They'll play Oregon State in the first round. USC, if they end up being the number 2 seed, if Oregon does win, then they will play the winner of the 7-10 game, which looks like it'll probably be Utah versus Washington. So there's a chance that they could face off with the Utes again. Now that game will be, if they're a 2 seed, they'll play at 5:30 p.m. on Thursday. If they end up winning the 1 seed, they actually play a morning game. They'll play at 11:30, but then they'll play the winner of the 8-9 game. So, we'll see where they are. It just depends on that Sunday game, but they've got a great opportunity to go there and make some more noise. They played really well against everyone except for Colorado at times this season. And I think they want that opportunity actually to play Colorado to kind of prove themselves and say that, hey, we can get over that hump and you can play that physical Buffaloes team with McKinley Wright.
Alrighty, Shotgun. Any final thoughts before we wrap this one up?
Interested to see Isaiah White's health and him coming back, but that's going to be something to keep an eye on. Just because you get in a tournament setting, if you do make it to the championship, USC is going to play 3 games in 3 days, so you want to get a full roster back as much as you can. But just going back to it, just a big win for USC. It's always fun to beat your rival, so they were super excited. The shot goes through, and I love Taji's reaction. He wasn't the guy screaming and yelling. He just had a huge smile on his face, and the rest of the team just swarmed around him and kind of carried him. Like they got to him around the free throw line, and then by the end of it, they were off on the sideline, over on the edge, just loving up on him and giving him a lot of daps and congratulations. It was fun to see. Again, I've said this several times this season, but just wish the fans could have been there because there's no greater feeling to me. Now, this is my personal opinion. There's no greater feeling than shutting a crowd up. It's great. Like Jonah Matthews' 3-pointer last year, the crowd goes crazy. That's great. But it's completely different when you have completely silenced an arena. It's such a power move.
Sure, yeah.
It would have been great to see. He did silence the arena today. They just stopped playing the music and everything after the game. The announcer was just like, and that's the ball game, and the PA. So it was kind of unique there, but a huge win for USC to get that win over at UCLA and give them some momentum going forward. That's a big thing too. After struggling early in this game, they built up momentum as the game progressed, got their only lead when it mattered most, the final shot of the game.
Alrighty, that's going to wrap it up for USC's 64-63 win over UCLA. For Shotgun Spratling, I'm Keely Eure. For more, check out USCfootball.com.